How's it going, YouTube? It has been a while, and it's unlikely that I'll ever make videos with true consistency for the algorithm, but when I have something to share, I want to share it. So I want to share something today that I kind of stumbled upon. To give you some history, I've always been a big Fuji fan. As you know, I've used the X-H2S. I think it's a great camera. I think the autofocus is absolutely amazing, on par with the A7 IV by Sony. I've got, let's see here, this guy, is this showing up on the, I don't know if it's going to focus, was that XE1, one of my favorites of all time. This guy, I don't know if it's focusing, the XE2. I've got gaffing tape on it, but this is the, let's see, X-T5, great camera. Side note, does anyone else put this all over their cameras? Somebody mentioned doing it in a couple of spots, and I think it's an addiction. I have an issue for sure. So I like that it protects certain areas of the camera. I feel like it gives me a good feel in the camera, and also like kind of the blackout look. So, but that's not what I wanted to talk about today. What I wanted to talk about today is having given up on the XT line by Fuji after the XT2. I pretty much was like, I'm never going back. And then, of course, the X-T5 comes out, and it's like, whoa, 40 megapixel sensor, you know, amazing autofocus. So I thought, do I give the X-T5 a try, or maybe try the X-T4? So I found a deal on an X-T4, I think less than 3,000 shots, it's like $1,000. I picked it up knowing that I can sell it if I don't like it, if I'm not happy with it. And after the first day, I'm listing this thing for sale, absolutely listing it. And then the second day I put it in a smaller bag, walked around with it in the 27 millimeter, and I think a backup 18 to 55, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I haven't really mentioned in any video, but I'm currently trying the R6 II by Canon. Not because I, hate the Fuji or hate the Sony, but I wanted to give Canon a try. So, but where I'm going is, today I was ready to get in the car, drive to Sammy's, and buy the X-T5. Based on watching YouTube videos and watching the reviews and hearing how great the megapixels, the new high megapixel sensor is, and how the noise isn't bad. Even with the 40 megapixels, the resolution is worth it, I think was one of the quotes they said. I know the noise is a little bit worse, but I'll still take that 40 megapixel sensor. So instead of just taking them at their word, I went to their website and used their test charts and did some analysis of my own. And had I gotten the results I thought I would get, I would have gone to buy the X-T5, and I never would have made this video. But I did not get the results that I expected. And so I am making this video. And part of this video is going to literally be me just on the computer giving you some examples of comparisons on test charts between the X-T5, the X-T4, the Canon R6 Mark II, and maybe a high resolution sensor camera just for perspective. So I think that's what I'll do. I already know the answer. I've made this video several times, and I'm learning to make videos. I basically lost a ton of this, so I'm trying to redo it. We'll see if it goes right this time, but hopefully you get something out of the comparison, and hopefully it helps you in your buying decisions. But long story short, they're all great cameras. It's a matter of what you need, but what it comes down to is, are some of these cameras worth the premium that they charge versus what you can buy used? And obviously, older used is going to be cheaper than new, brand new. And sometimes new, brand new might be better than everything. It might blow it away. But sometimes new, brand new might not even be better than used previous model. So anyway, I'll dive into the comparison. We'll go through that, and then I'll try to close. All right, let's dive in. So what you have here are test charts from DP Review. This is what they base their camera reviews on, their lens reviews on. What I've done here is literally just listed here the X-T5. We're going to look at RAWs. That should change RAWs to everything across the board. We're now at base ISO, so X-T5, X-T4. So new, old on Fuji at the top. And then down below, we have the Canon R6 Mark II. We have the Sony A7R 5, the resolution king. So known for having some ISO issues, but it's a specialty tool. So let's do this. Let's dive in right now. Let's see if I can move this up some so that we have a better view here. Let's just take the X-T5 and X-T4 at 800 ISO. These are raw images, and let's find a color patch. I'd like to look at the red. So right away, when I look at this, I see, ironically, that Sony has my favorite red. If I had to pick a second red, it would probably be the Canon, then the 4, then the 5. But as you can see here, the blacks are much better on the 4 than they are the 5. There's less noise here in the 4 and the 5, and that's at ISO 800. I think the Canon is doing very well. And as we go through these, you'll see that the Canon is kind of like the baseline, the mark to beat. I know it's full frame, but it's kind of like, you know, what Fuji could strive for in regards to resolution, noise levels, all that fun stuff. So let's climb this ISO ladder. Let's go to 1600. We already know that the A7R5 is a tool that's likely used in a controlled environment, so not really meant to shoot at higher ISOs. It's a professional tool. Here we can see noticeably higher noise levels at 1600. Excuse me. I don't know about all of you, but I want to be able to shoot up to 3200 with a little bit of noise, and if need be, up to ISO 6400, knowing that I'm going to get some noise, but I can still maybe convert the image to black and white and save the image without significant noise reduction. But if we look at the images here, again, Canon, to me it's Canon. We're just going to, Sony is what it is. I'm just putting this in here for like a true high sensor comparison. The X-T5 and the Sony are the highest megapixel sensors here. The Canon and the X-T4 are actually pretty close. The X-T4 looks to have better blacks. And the X-T5, to me, has a noticeably higher level of noise in the blacks and in the colors. We're going to go just skip right to 64. I'm not going to waste a lot of your time here. You see what the Sony's doing. I probably shouldn't talk about that anymore. But here we have much, much higher noise levels impacting color. I mean, this color's gone. This color's kind of gone. This color is absolutely gone. But as you can see, this isn't a little bit. And so right now what I'm doing is I'm comparing noise levels out of color. So we're going to talk about just overall noise levels, how it impacts color, but we're also going to talk about noise levels and how it impacts sharpness and resolution. Because again, the quote is, hey, those megapixels are worth it because you got that 40 megapixel sensor that's going to save all that clarity and sharpness for you. We're going to see if that's actually the case. So let's look at one more color. Let's look at a blue. We're going to go back down to 800. We'll do this quickly. I won't waste too much of your time. Honestly, my favorite blue is a Canon. Wow, those are really close. This is my second favorite blue. And then I think my third favorite is actually the 5. But at 800, I mean, take a look for yourself. Let's see if I can make this even bigger. Significant loss of sharpness, in my opinion. Lower black levels, higher noise levels at 800. That's not a high ISO, in my opinion. Let's go to 32. Significant loss of color, lower black levels. The black levels on the X-T4 at 3200 actually look better than the Canon. The blue on the Canon, it's a full frame versus APC, so it's holding out a little bit less noise, but I mean, we start to ask the question, this camera used is $1,100 bucks, 1,100 or 1,000, depending on where you find it. This camera used is 1,600 or over 1,800 new with taxes. Are we going to get the resolution that's, I guess, survives the noise? That's the question. So let's move on to 6400 just so we can see it. I'm not going to be doing ISO 12800 because I think that's worthless. The Sony 5, again, that's a specialty tool. It's already gone. Here, I'd say pretty close. The blacks are surviving much better on the 4. They're gone on the 5. And other than the blacks not being as dark, the Canon looks really good for 6400 in my opinion. That's not bad at all. I'm going to resist the temptation to go to 12,800. So let's do this. Let's go back to base ISO across all sensors. And let's look at sharpness and clarity relative to these sensors and these high versus not as high megapixels. I guess the first question here is at base ISO, do you feel like you're getting your money's worth between the X-T4 and the X-T5? And I would argue the 4s, the blacks are better in this area. This is muffled. I would argue that the sharpness of these words are better than the sharpness in these words. Excuse me. And again, here's what you could kind of, what the two Fujis could be compared to, and that like this is like a really good medium. I guess this is base ISO. Wow. I mean, now I compare these, and I'm not going to make that comment today because I'm not ready for that fight in the comments. But this R6 Mark II looks amazing. The colors, the sharpness, the lack of noise. But again, we're at base ISO. So let's, again, climb that ISO ladder. Let's go to 800. Now let's compare much higher noise and your blacks right here. This is still somewhat black. I would argue that the X-T4 is on par with the Canon at ISO 800 here in this area of the image. The 4 is blowing the 5 away. I'm choosing my words carefully, but it's blowing it away. Look at the sharpness of the words, of the honeycomb, the blacks. I mean, it's almost like, is this part of the image out of focus? It's that much, right? So let's climb up to 1600. I'll let you judge for yourself for a moment. Those are actually closer, in my opinion. Canon's still smoking them. Let's go straight to 6400. Excuse me, fighting a cold. And, I mean, I don't feel like there's any detail right here. I can still see this line on the X-T4. I still feel like I'm getting details over here in the words that I'm not getting here. Significantly levels of noise and color noise in the images here. And man, the Canon is holding up well. But the whole point of this comparison is the 40 megapixel sensor worth it? Does the clarity, does the sharpness, the resolution survive the noise? And so, if it were me and it's 500 to 800 bucks, I don't see the value. So, well, let's go down a little bit into this area. We'll go back to base ISO. We won't do this forever, but I think I'm making my point here. So, if this is these two are the standard, very sharp, very clean, very sharp, very clean, pretty sharp and clean, somewhat sharp, and that's the X-T5. It's like, are these mislabeled? Is this? I'm not going to make that comment because, again, I'm not ready for the comments. But look for yourself. I mean, seriously. I know this one's slightly bigger. This over here is slightly blown up due to the sensor size. But this, in my opinion, is clearly sharper than this. We don't even have to compare it. Let's skip straight to 3200. Well, I was going to ask, does the sharpness survive the ISO noise? But I don't think we started from a sharper image. So, I mean, in my opinion, I cannot find a reason to choose the X-T5 over the X-T4 unless you need that small gain in autofocus. Let's pick a different part of the image that I think will point this out quite well. So, when we're talking resolution surviving noise, we're now at base ISO. I would argue that this is sharper than the X-T5 again. And you can see the Canon and the X-T4 are kind of on par, honestly. Canon edging it out slightly. But this is clearly not as sharp as the X-T4. Let's just skip straight to 1600, go back to that argument of does the resolution survive the noise? And I would argue that it's close, but no. So we go down here, the Canon is now outperforming the X-T4, which would make sense. That's a full frame sensor. But this X-T5, there should be resolution here that holds its own and survives the noise relative to the X-T4. For giggles, let's look at a JPEG. I honestly can't tell a difference. Now, for giggles, 6400. Seriously? I mean, come on. You'd have to really, really want to have the X-T5 for that gain and autofocus. This line and this line, clearly, to me, this is a sharper line. You go down here, and this is obviously a more crisp 8. Let's bring this up some. Let's see what happens. Let's bring that up. Pin, oh, I can't see it. 8 to 8. To me, this is a sharper 8. And to me, this is a sharper 6. And we're at ISO 6400. Let's take it to 4. Pretty close. At ISO 400, they're close. So, one last thing I want to show you is right here. Let's go back to base ISO to give you something to compare to. Excuse me. In these images, I want you to focus on what you can see in the thread and then the clarity of the text and the numbers on these images. So this is base ISO. Again, these two are, the benchmark, the clarity of the numbers. You can see the stitching, the crossing. Here you can see the stitching, the crossing, the clarity of the numbers. This is all base ISO. This is as good as it's going to get. I would say that between these two, it's extremely close. I can't see a significant improvement in the thread, or not the stitching, the thread, and maybe slightly better here in the orange. And I do not see an increase in sharpness or more sharpness or clarity in the text on the X-T5 at base ISO. Let's just go straight to 1600. There we have, this is gone. This is pretty much gone. I can still see some here. I actually see better, I think, individual threads on the 5. I'm not completely biased, but you can see much better on the Canon. But to me, look at this number 100 and these numbers. I mean, I need to take my contacts out, but I don't see this being sharper than this. I do see this being sharper than this because it's bigger. Let's go up a little to the blues. Again, we're at 1600. This compared to this. I mean, if you want the newer camera, that's great. But if you're expecting the new camera to blow away the old camera, it's not going to. Let's go to 6400. And, I mean, I think this is all muddled. I can't see any major... Wow, the Canon's holding the details of that text really well. So, I'm not here to bash the X-T5. I was actually going to go buy the X-T5 today. Let's look at this one real quick. But I just think there are a lot of videos out there on YouTube that are talking about how good the resolution is from that 40 megapixel sensor, that it can survive higher noise levels. And you don't test that by shooting in dynamic lighting, outdoors, indoors, all that fun stuff. You test noise, sharpness, or sharpness surviving noise increases in ISO in an environment like this. So let's just go 1600 on this, see what we can grab. So for yourself, compare watercolor, watercolor. I mean, this is the mark to beat. Wow, holy moly, that Canon looks good. That was not supposed to be the takeaway. But when I look at this, I don't see any significant difference in the sharpness and the clarity. In fact, I think the X-T4 looks better in this image. See if there's any other areas that I was wanting to show. Maybe we close with the Queen, and we'll just go straight to 3200 and see what we can see. This is tough. Those are extremely close images. Extremely close. I feel like I'm getting a better red right here. I feel like this is a little sharper, honestly. Maybe it's just because it's not zoomed that much. Wow. Yeah. I mean, the takeaway is the Canon's just kicking everybody's ass. So if you want to spend a little more, I don't know, what is the X-T5, like just under $2,000? I know, there's the whole Canon RF lens thing. So we'll close it with that, and I will try to sum things up. But I just wanted to share this comparison with you, and hopefully it helps. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments. Thank you very much. So what'd you think? I apologize if the audio was weird. I'm definitely fighting a cold and was using headphones on a laptop. If anyone has any feedback on what the best way to screen capture is, I'm open to that, because I'm definitely would like to do more videos where I share things like that where I'm on the computer. I mean, I literally just opened up QuickTime, threw in some headphones, and just went at it. So the whole point was just to show you my thoughts on the resolution of the X-T5 from that new sensor relative to the resolution and noise levels of the X-T4. From my informal, non-professional analysis, I would say that the X-T5 is at least one stop worse when it comes to noise levels across the board, and that I am not seeing from those test charts resolution or sharpness survive the increase in noise and the increase in ISO relative to the X-T4. That's it. Probably the biggest takeaway is that this camera right here, the R6 Mark II, is a beast. Never used Canon, ever. I used to wonder, it's like, oh my God, do these people get paid to use Canon? I know they're amazing cameras. But as you know, I've used Nikon, love Nikon, but I don't love their autofocus. I love Fuji. I gave Fuji a shot, and I kind of went back to the Sony a7 IV. And the a7 IV, amazing, amazing camera. Ironically, was tempted by the A7R5, but I'm glad I didn't buy that. Again, you can see from the images, that's a specialty tool. For what I do, I would have not been happy with that camera at ISO 3200 plus, which is where I'm at sometimes. But I've always wanted to try Canon, always. And I didn't even know there was an R6 Mark II. And I was somewhere and I saw it, and they're like, this is the greatest camera ever. The autofocus is better than the Sony, it's better than the Fuji, it's better than everything. I think it is. Like right now, it's switching eyes. It's like boom, the other eye, boom. I've used it with my kids, I've used it in kids' sports, you know, having them out in the backyard, they're moving between poles, and it's just literally like following them. Doesn't grab the pole, keeps with them, super sticky. The pets, everything. So, I mean, that's a review for another day. I shouldn't be talking about Canon too much. Back to the Fuji. If you're in the market for a not large Fuji body, meaning not the XH line, and you don't want something small, like these little, you know, XC cameras, you don't need the new Fuji. In fact, I don't know that I brought it up in the video or in my earlier section, but the files from this Canon, the file sizes, I shoot raw, uncompressed. And the files from this camera are under 30 megabytes. The files from my Fuji, I think, are in the 50 megabyte range. The files, Fuji X-T4, the files from the X-T5 are 80 to 90 megabytes. If I go out and I take 50 to 100 shots, I'm gonna come back, and I'm gonna import those photos into my iPhone, straight to Lightroom, or on my iPad, straight to Lightroom. That's going to be a significant amount of time increase in loading 50, 100, 150 images at almost 100 megs, and the loading of actually those images on the screen in order to edit them. So for me, there's literally zero reason to buy the X-T5. Zero. If I were to move up to that sensor, it would make more sense for me to buy the XH2, because that way I get the EVF, the glorious EVF of the XH2 line. I get, you know, a more robust body, let's be honest. I get probably a little bit better autofocus. So, you know, if you're out there with an X-T3 and you're wanting to upgrade, don't feel the need. Don't feel like you've got to grab the 5. Grab a 4 for, you know, $1,000 or so. So that's my thoughts. As always, if you have questions, let me know. If you have feedback, let me know. I appreciate all input. More than willing to engage and answer questions as I can. And I appreciate your time, and have a good one. See ya.